Thank you. Let's turn now to the topic of education, one of the most critical and costly public goods that state government provides. There are actually several critical goods whose cost is rising these days, much to the dismay of citizens and leaders. I'm thinking of health care, especially prescription drugs, gasoline and other energy, and education in the form of rising tuition costs and rising property taxes, driven partly by school district funding challenges. All three of you have addressed all of these cost concerns, but there does seem to be a difference. On health care and fuel costs, we often hear criticism of the providers of those goods. We hear calls for more competition. We hear calls for new laws to restrict some of their actions and to mandate reforms, to empower consumers and reduce administrative costs. I wonder if you can tell us where reform and accountability plays a part in your education plans. Does competition play any part? Does an attempt to get greater efficiency in the delivery of education play any part? While pursuing greater quality, can you discuss some of your thoughts about controlling cost increases in education? We begin with 2 minutes, and Attorney General Hatch.
You know, we compete in a global economy, and as I mentioned earlier on education, part of it is the individual opportunity. We believe in a meritocracy in America. You give the kids the tools, and hopefully by hard work and discipline they go on and they achieve a better life for themselves. But we also compete in a global economy, and right now, with our education system, if we don't watch it, we're not going to be able to compete. Our growing sectors in Minnesota over the last 4 years, fastest growing sectors of employment: fast foods, restaurants, temporary help, and government. These are not the kind of jobs that are going to be competitive in a global economy. Most of them aren't sustainable. Most of them don't provide health benefits. You need to have a top-notch quality education system. 50% of our kids enter kindergarten, they're not prepared. They don't know the colors, their numbers. Some cases they don't know their name. They don't speak English very well. They're not well enough to be able to communicate to one another. 1/3 of our kids coming out of high school are unable, or they're not financially, academically, or coming from a family structure where they're able to go out of college, and that's supposed to increase to 2/3 in the next 10 years. The average high school graduate who does not go on to higher education has an income that's insufficient to pay for a 2-bedroom apartment in this area. Forget the food, forget the clothing, forget the transportation. I'm just talking about paying the rent. So we've got a lot. We need an education system, and we need to support these kids and make it as better for them as our parents did for us. I'm talking about financial access to college. I'm talking about having all-day kindergarten. I'm talking about making sure we have mentorship programs in high schools. The object here is the best education system possible.
Thank you. Plenty.
Minnesota has a proud and wonderful tradition of leading the nation in education results and innovation and many other measures, and we want to keep it that way. We continue to lead the nation in #1 again in ACT scores, near the top of the heap in NAEP scores, and near the top of the heap in graduation rates, and so many other measures. And this is profoundly important. We live in a hyper-competitive global economy, and we're not going to win the competition because we're the biggest as a nation or as a state. We're not. We're competing against countries in terms of the demographic, the volume of their population that's much larger. We're not going to win because we're the cheapest. We don't want to have a race to the bottom with Mexico or China on labor rates. That would be bad for our quality of life, and we want to go there. So we're going to win by having the smartest state, not the biggest or the cheapest, but the smartest. And that means we're going to have to be really good at providing a skilled and productive and efficient workforce, and making sure we're innovative and inventive, and making sure that we're focused on productivity and efficiency and creativity and so many other things. It speaks to an education system. Now, obviously, our education system in Minnesota has served us very well. But listen to the debate very carefully in Minnesota and around the nation. 95% of all the energy in the debate in Congress, in St. Paul, and everywhere else is, how much money we're going to get? Now, that's an important question, and we should get our schools more money. They need to, higher ed and K-12, their costs go up. We need to get them more money. But I also want to force the question, we'll continue to force the question as governor, what are we getting for it, and how can we spend the money better? How can it be more impactful and more efficient? How can we hold schools and higher education institutions more accountable for results, and how can we prepare them for the future? We have a great system, but it was designed and built in the 1940s in a one-size-fits-all industrial world, and we don't live in that world anymore. We live in the iPod world. And I'm out of time, but when I come back with my next 2 minutes, I'm going to continue this discussion and give you the rest of my answer.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchins.
You know, we faced this very question when I was in Minneapolis, and I learned an important lesson that apparently we haven't quite learned statewide, but it's out there for us to learn. It really matters what it is you say you expect. In No Child Left Behind, we say we expect kids to pass the test. Well, for the kids already well above in terms of their performance, they get ignored because they're going to pass the test anyway. And for the kids way, way below who have no chance of passing the test, they get ignored. So the system has an incentive in it to focus on a little thin piece of the student body that's kind of on the bubble. That's what we were doing in Minneapolis when I got there. We got rid of that. We said the challenge ought to be to see to it that every kid that attends our schools for a year ought to grow at least a year's worth that year. And the kids furthest behind ought to grow the most. And we made that an expectation for every classroom, for every school, and for the district as a whole. And the consequences of doing that were really powerful, because the teachers really could identify with the idea that every child should move at least that year's worth every year, and they committed themselves to that, as opposed to committing to just passing the test, making sure that every child progressed. And that's how we turned the system around. We got it focused on an outcome that really mattered to kids, and mattered to teachers, and mattered to their parents. And it's that combination that produces good educational outcomes. Now, as to the questions of things like, should we have competition? Should we have choice? Of course, we already have those things, and we should keep them. Every parent wants to have a choice. Every kid wants to believe that they have choice, that they have some power over their own education, and the more they're engaged in that education, the better job they're going to do. That's the future for us, is to make our education system not just pass the test, but actually work for every child.
Thank you.